Shalom Avracha, good morning, Ahuvai V'Rei. Let's start before we turn our attention to the end of Parshas Mishpatim Siyata D'Shmaya. Let's turn first towards a well-known Gemara in the end of Maseches Chulin. We're in Perek Shiluach HaKein, 12 Perek in Maseches Chulin. Daf Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. What takes place? Amrulei Papunai l'Rav Masna. The Papunai said to Rav Masna, what's the din if you find a bird's nest that's resting on the head of a person? Amar ve'adama rosha, based on a posuk legabe David HaMelech. The Gemara understands that since man is offer min adama and the cane is now sitting on his head, as Rashi explains, even though it's sitting barosha lo avda shema, it still doesn't lose its name, that it's kilu, it's resting on the aretz, on the adama. Shema mina adam gufei adamahu, that Adam himself is adama, and therefore a nest resting atop his head, it's still called being on the adama. He's not called offer, so hashtanami al aretz kavina bay, it's still called being al aretz. And we address that question. On the heels of that, Va'od Zeh Sholo Imenu, continues Rashi, Minayin LaMoshe, Remez Kodim Shebosha Sofolovu. Rashi already now is explaining the Hemshech of the Gemara on the heels of that question, since we were talking about Adama and Adam, Ofrim and Adama, on the heels of that, the Moshe and Torah Minayin. How do I know Moshe Rabbeinu? Where's the Remez before Moshe Rabbeinu came and emerged onto the world stage? Where's the Remez in the Torah? B'Shegamu Basar, back in Bereshis, B'Shegam Gematria 345, Gematria Moshe, and Marsha notice explain the correlation. Haman and Torah Minayin. Haman it's also in Bereshis. The Gabe Eitzadas Tovara. Esther and Torah Minayin. Vanochi Esther. Mordechai and Torah Minayin. The Siv. Mar Dorom. Tarmigan Meiradachia. Famous Gemara. 4 people. Where's the Remez? And that they're hinted to in the Torah before they entered the spotlight and occupied center stage in that world story. So now we have 4 people and only 4 people. The Gemara questions. We have Moshe and Torah Minayin, Haman and Torah Minayin, Esther and Torah Minayin, and Mordechai and Torah Minayin. So we have to wonder why Dafka these 4. Why are these the only 4 people in Gantz Shas, 2711 folio pages of Talmud Bavli, and the only 4 we ask the question, where's the Remez? Before they existed, before their birth, where's the Remez in the Torah? So Marsha points out as follows. They have a lot of other names. We have Moshe, he's called Tuvia, Vigor, etc. The Medrash says he had 7 names on the Medrash. We're talking about 10 names. The Gemara and Sota, Yud Beis and Aleph, obviously we have several names there. Haman also, we know what he's Haman. We see he's Memuchan. And Esther, she's Hadasta. Mordechai is Mordechai and he's Psachia. So we have other names. But the Marshal Lachar has to say a little more. Well, Yisro also had 7 names. And Betzalel had 7 names. We have other people. Daniel had other people also had other names. So the Marsha has to go weiter, and indeed he does. Lefi Anire. A person could have argued, continues the Heilige Marshal, let's keep in mind, Moshe Shapiro has said in the past that every word of the Marshal's Chedusha Agodos was written Mila B'Mila Baruch HaKodesh. So the Marshal explains, he himself has to address, but there are other people in history who have had more than one name. Continues the Marshal, but here one could have argued that the names that are miyucha to them are not Iker min HaTorah. Why? Because Moshe was named by Bas Paro. And Mamela, the name Moshe is a Loshen Mitzri, as many Mefarshim point out. And Haman, Mordechai, and Esther, Nira, Kishemis Parsiim, hey. Ki Megillah, Nichtava, Ayah, they are Parsiim. These are Persian names. So you might say Moshe Rabbeinu was given an Egyptian name, a Shem Mitzri, and these 3 individuals living in Paras Amade, they had Persian names. So you might say, Eina Iker min HaTorah, so their true identity is not going to be rumors in the Torah. Then that's why Shem Hashem is not in the Megillah, like the Ibn Ezra says, because it was written by the Parsiim. Again, you have to work that out with the Chazals about Mordechai and Esther writing it. Okay, and that's why I have these Ramazim to tell you, even if you're going to argue that they might have been foreign names, but you see that is the Rikr name that does highlight and captures their Etzem Ahus, alright, because it already has a Remez She'ikru Min HaTorah. Okay, perhaps we can add something onto the Marsha as well, and we could also pose another type of question based on the Klal Yadua, a Ritzadik Akomi Lublin. Every Agadat says a Masechta for a reason. Every Agadat it says in a parak for a reason. I might say, what's this doing in Chulin? What's this doing in Shiluach HaKain? What is this Gemara doing out of all Prakim and Shas? Parak Shiluach HaKain, you're talking about Nes Habirds. What's this doing here? Moshe, Esther, Haman, Rabbi. What's Pshat? Perhaps the idea is as follows. The pasuk at the end of this week's parsha, Parshas Mishpatim, Parak Chav Dalet pasuk at Beis reads as follows. Vayom Hashem Moshe Aleya Hayahara Vayisham Etan Uchas Luchas Even Vatera Mitzvah Asher Kasafti Lo Rasim. So we go to the Gemara and Brachas Taf Hayim and Aleph, and the Gemara tells us, what are we referencing in the context of this pasuk? Amar Rishim Lakish Reish Lakish asks, Smaidich Siv, this week's parsha and Chav Dalet of Mishpatim Enel Uchas Luchas Even etc. Luchas Reish Lakish tells us Elo Aser Sedibris Taira Ze Mikra. Rashi says, what's Mikra Chumash, a mitzvah likas for Torah. It's a reference to Chumash, not to Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Ha-mitzvah, Zu Mishnah, Asher kasafti elu nevi'im uksuvim, Torah shebachsav, leharasam, hara, that's Gemara, Yuma chavav amenal lasuki shmaisa, Liba de Hilchas says, Gemara malami, chekulam ninu lemoshe Sinai. They're all given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai. And now this is a pella. Why in the world would the Torah write, based on the way Reish Lakish Chazal darshan the pasuk, we have Torah which is Mikra, Torah shebachsav, and that's only now Chumash, the mitzvah is Mishnah, and then we go back to Asher kasafti, which is Nevi'im and Ksuvim, the remaining chalakim of Torah Shvachsav, the written Torah, and then we go to Gemara. Now, if you were writing this pasuk, if you were writing the Gemara, wouldn't it go Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, Mishnah, and then Gemara? What's going on over here? So the idea is as follows, and I in the Hagdama to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky's Emes Liyaakov Ola Torah. I and Rav Avram Baruch, Rav Avram Yitzchak Sorotzkin, the son of Rav Sorotzkin, Gevaldig Gvurus Yitzchak, on Anyoni Purim and Maimer Yudalid. Al-Chora comes out very geschmack. Why? There is a chilik even within the context of Torah Shebachsav. There's a chilik of Torah, and Torah exists forever. The Nevi'im and Ksuvim, though. Mitzad Sheni, yes, it's a chilik of Torah Shebachsav, but Mitzad Sheni from another angle, yet another perspective, it's also a pirush of what's going on in the Torah. Same way the Gemara says in Tainas, Daf Tesam and Aleph. Lekamidi, Delo Ramizi Baraisa Rabbi Yochanan says everything is sent to two in the Torah. Everything has a remez, has a smach. In the end of the day, writes the Menos Levi, writes the Al Shech HaKodesh, both on Megillas Esther. How could we go ahead and say that the Osalovo, all the Sfarim will be bottle Mavuto except for Megillas Esther, the famous member of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish in the Yerushalmi, in Megillah, and of course we have the Rambam paskening that Yerushalmi, the very last Haloch Hanuchas Purim Hanuchas Megillah, Perak Beis Haloch Yirches writes the Eilig Rambam, and it's based on the Yerushalmi and the Medrash Tov as well. Kol Sifrei Anavim Achol Ksuvim Asidin Libot L'Moshe Shechutz Megillah Esther, except for Megillah Esther. So how could they be botel? Frank the Raven and the Rambam, how can you go in and tell me that the Chelik of Torah is going to be botel? So writes the Ramey Simcha from the Venskin is Zor Sameach, based on the Gemara. He references in the Darm Chav and Beis that had Klai Yisrael not sinned, Yisrael, so they saw them what? They would have had just Chamisha Chamshay Torah and Sefer Yeshuvnei Erka Shal Eretz Yisrael. What do you see from there? That the Nevuas that came, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel, Yeshayim, Achule, and that was the Nevuah Shehutzu Choladoris, the whole Sigim Megillah Yadal and Manaf. We had millions of Nevi'im. Who were the Memches Nevi'im? We had Memches Nevi'im, we had Zayin Nevi'is. That's a Nevuah Shehutzu Choladoris. But in the end of the day, Avada as these Gedolei Achronim answered the Rambam. Rambam doesn't mean the Torah is going to be batal. The Torah is going to be there, but you'll find the Ramazim when Molei Deir, the whole world's going to be filled with the whole altogether otherworldly level of das. We're going to find the Ramazim, the Asmacht, everything's going to be extracted and inferred from the Chumash itself. We're going to find in the Chumash itself all the Torah and the Nevi'im and Ksuvim. So the Achronim point out There's a bechina of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim mitzad echad. That's a chelik of the written Torah Shebachsav, and in certain cases of how do we group Nevi'im and Ksuvim along with Torah. I know so of Hunter Pachad Yitzchak and Shavuos Maimer Beis Chaluk in between and Nevi'im and Ksuvim, etc. But then we have what? We have another idea that there's a Nevi'im and Ksuvim which is coming to be mafaresh of Ramazim that are in Torah that are fleshed out and extrapolated and expounded upon in the course of Nevi'im and Ksuvim. But that's not Hutzuch L'Dairas. All the Torahs Hutzuch L'Dairas, but the yesod of it all is packed there in the Chumash. So that's our Gemara Brachas Tav Hey and Aleph. How can we separate Nevi'im and Ksuvim from Torah? Because the Gemara is telling us there's another aspect to Nevi'im and Ksuvim in their relationship vis-a-vis the Torah. There's the Luchas Evan Elu Aser Sedibris. There's the Torah Zemikra. That is the Chumash Shemitzvah Likras Bo. Now we go on to what? We're breaking up Torah Shulchan. Why? Because this Gemara is telling us there's a separate aspect altogether of the written Torah. There's Torah, which is Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and then there's Mishnah, which is Pirush, as the Rambam writes in his Akdama to the Arach Hazaka. Torah Shebapeh is a Pirush, the Pirush of the Torah Shebachsav, and then we go back Asati Eilu Nevi'im and Ksuvim, which is a Pirush of Torah Shebachsav, and then we go to Gemara. So what's the Gemara telling us? In between Mishnah and Gemara is Nevi'im and Ksuvim. It didn't make any sense, we asked. I know, but Hagufa, precisely this aspect in Nevi'im and Ksuvim is highlighting the aspect in Nevi'im and Ksuvim Mitzad Echad is also fleshing out and expounding upon and being in a sense a pirush of the Torah Shebachsav, and thus we sandwich in Nevi'im and Ksuvim between the Mishnah and the Gemara. That's one chelik of what the Pasuk says at the end of this week's Parsha, Asher Kasafti, that it's coming as a pirush. But what? The Rambam tells us based on the Yerushalmi and based on the Yalkut and the Medrash Shochatov, Kol Sifrei Nevi'im Achol Ksuvim Asidin Li Botel Moshe Chutz Megillas Esther. And that's not going to be Botel. But the Rambam says what? Harei kayemes kechamishu chumshei Torah ukeilcha shetor shoapeh she'einu b'tzeil yolam. The Rambam, who is always makatzer, ever succinct. And what does he tell us? Not just a gevaldige skula, a miyuchadik a maila to Megillas Esther, Megillah Daf Zayin Amanav Kisvuni L'Dairas. It's going to be around forever. It's around forever, and it's what? Harei kayemes kechamishu chumshei Torah. The Rambam spends an extra line letting us know that it has a status. It's kayem like chamishu chumshei Torah. Now let's flip back in Chulin. Kuf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, writes Rashi in Chulin. Tyrus Moshe, Kruya Tyra. Why is it called Torah Lefi Sheninna Tyra Ladoros? That's called Zucha Torahs Moshe Avdi. And what's unique about Tyra? It's given for all generations. Vishal Nevi'im Lo Kari Ela Kabbalah. That's called Divrei Kabbalah. Shekibla Beruach HaKodesh Ko Nevuah. Every other nevuah, that means all the prophecies you read about in the pages, the heilige sacred pages on Nevi'im and Ksuvim, that was B'chinas Ruach HaKodesh nevuah, and that was a nevuah Shehutzuch L'Daris, which came for the door, came for the Shah, came for a specific Maisa, but it's not knowing L'Doros. The Iker Nakuda that defines something as Torah is what? That it's going to be around the Doros. Dr. Rambam, since Megillas Esther is going to be the one lone sefer out of all of Nach, out of all of the scope, the gamut of Nevi'im and Ksuvim, and that's going to be around forever. And in a sense, it has a din, a status, a quasi status of Chamishu Chumshei Torah Mamish. So now we understand. What's the Gemara telling us? Everything in the world, Lamaisa. Even the names, let's start with the Marsha. That you might think are not Torah-tic names, are not Kodesh-tic names. Moshe, Bas Paro. And you might think Esther, Mordechai, and Haman. These are all Shemus, Parsi, and Persian names. Kamashalon, it's all Torah. Abaisai, what Masech are we in? Chulin. What do we know about Chulin? The Bnei Yissaschar writes in Devar Nechmodim. If you look at Rashi and Taisus many times in Shas, they don't even call them Masechas Chulin. They call them Masechas Shchitas Chulin. And why do they call it Shchitas Chulin? Writes the Heilige Din of a Rebbe. You know why? Because in there's no such thing as Chulin. Because what does the Gemara say? Reb Shimon Yechai, Sukkah Chafal of Beis, Afilu Sichas Chulin Shetaminu Cham V'Ilima Tzak the Heilig B'nei Yissaschar. Even the Chulin has to be treated like Kedusha Shnamar Ba'alei Lo Yibol Tzeilamam. So Rabbi says, stay with me on this one. When you Shtelzu put together the B'nai Yissaschar with the Marsha, it comes out what? What's the Chiddush over here? That we have to ask Dafka by these four people, because you might think Moshe Rabbeinu was given the name by Bas Paro, it's the Egyptian name, and it is an Egyptian name, and these three names, the story of Purim, their Persian names, Kamashla, no, even then Ikram and Atayra, this was the Shem Etzem, this was the main name, and Ikram and Atayra. So what Masech is this going to be? And Gevaldik Chulin, and what's the Gevaldik Chulin? It's Afilu why? Because there is no musig of chulin. Because even that which is chol, even the shchi, even the stam chulin. And what's chulin all about? Kol shoichlin, periko shoichet. Perikelu Trefus, about animals, about food. Perikola Bosser, Genanosha, food, glorious food, Dvarim Gashmi B'Yoser. Even this is Kedusha, Yemakanish the food, they want Shchita, Achila with Broncos, Ayin of Tzadik and his Kuntrus and Achila. I'd say for Tanya, Perksai Mechula, we're Makanish the Achila Shabo. Asemesechas Chula, that's where we have what? The four names that you might think are not Kodesh, that you might think are not Ikrum in a Tarakasaka Daitoch. Kamashalom, what's the Gemara teaching us? Even this is Ikrum in a even in Maseches Chulin, these names you might think are Chulin names. Shemesh Chulin, no, they're not. So now we answer what's it doing at Shuluch HaKain? Keep it avim, we can understand. Riches Yomim Shuluch HaKain. What other mitzvah besides keeping avayim do you get Arichas Yomim? Arichas Yomim is what? Shaluach HaKain. Arichas Yomim Shaluach HaKain. Rabbi say, why are we highlighting besides Moshe Rabbeinu? I understand. Why are we highlighting these other three? Only three other people. Yisro's not on the list, but Salah's not on the list. Aniyah's up. Why are we highlighting Davka the three? I made people the protagonists and antagonists of the Purim story, the Feiner Yastaiti. Because what? The men Shocher Tova Mishlei. Also Purim is going to be Zichum Layasum Izarim, but Purim's never going to be Bata. Ayin the Brisker Rav and Cherushim Aran Rizal Levi on the Horus in the back of Megillah Esther. Purim's around forever, and Zirchon Yasam Megillah Esther's around forever. And that's the Yeshami, that's the Mershot, that's the Rambam, and Beis Yechesach's Megillah. Megillah Esther's around forever, Rabbi say. And when we're talking about names, Perek Shiluach HaKain. Shiluach HaKain is one, Arichas Yamim goes on forever. Asam Amela, not only Moshe Rabbeinu does his Torah go on forever, Moshe Rabbeinu, but even Haman, Esther, Mordechai, their Sefer, Esther. Purim goes on forever, my dear friends. And Megillah Esther goes on forever. Where's that going to be? And a parak called Shiluach HaKain. There's no parak of Kibbut Avayim, by the way, in Shas. There are sugyas, obviously, towards the end of the longest parak in Shas was the first parak in Kedushin. We have a lot of sugyas, the Naflam and Aleph. Etc. The Gabi keep it up. Hey, but there's only one best Shiluach HaKain. This goes on. Arichas Yomin. You bet. Purim goes on forever. Now it's very geschmack. And now we have a samach to the lashon of the Rambam. What do we say? Moshe. That's Zirchotos Moshe Avdi. But you know what? Not only Moshe Zirchotos Moshe Avdi, as Rashi told us in Chulam Kaflam and Zayin and Aleph. That Tyrus Moshe is that which lasts forever. That's Ladore Doris. It's not just Harosha or based on a certain Maisa, a certain Tkufa Mesayemes. This is forever. So now it's Geshmak and the heels of that. Zok the Rambam. Kol Sifrei Nevi'im Chok Suva Masidli Botim Motu Shechutz Megas Esther Vari Kayemes Kachamish Chum Sheitayra. It's around Chamish Chum, just like Moshe and Torah Minayim. We start with Moshe Rabbeinu. Zichot Torahs Moshe Avdi. Not only is Moshe and Torahs Moshe, but you should know that Haman, Esther, Mordechai, Kayemes Megillas Esther, that they all wrote, that they all put together, that whole story is Kayemes Kachamish Chum Sheitayra. That's Machai that have added their names, and their names they have the Asmach, the Ikra of the Shem Etzem, as they're ready in the Torah of the that's why it's Dafka limited to these four people. The Chiddush is Moshe Beinu Menatav, that's Moshe. On the heels of that, as only one other Sefer in all in the Nevi'im Ksuvim, that's going to be Kayemes, like Chamisha Chumshe Torah, that's always going to be around, that's never going to be Botel, and even though you might have thought that it's Chul and Mamish, Kamashal, that's the biggest Chiddush, you might think it's Parsiim, it's so foreign, it's Mamish, because it's opposite of Torah, Kamashal, even that's a Chelik and Torah, and even their names, just like Moshe, sandwiched together with Moshe Rabbeinu, and just like Moshe Rabbeinu's name is already there in the Torah, at the beginning of the Torah, Haman's name is also the beginning of the Torah, and Hester and Mordechai, Esther ben Nochi, Esther, Meir Mitariga, Meir Dachia, and Mesachas Chulin. It's Kodesh too. Shuluch HaKain goes on forever. You bet they go on forever. Amela, we answer that's why it's Dafka these four, and it's Meduyik and the Nusach and the Rambam. And then Chayimes, Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and the end of the day, the rest of the Nevi'im Ksuvim, that's in between Mishnah and Gemara, the Gemara Brachas, Tafayim and Aleph, that's a separate category, that's the Pirish, but that's the Shem Torah, the Chitzah Shel Torah, that's Torah, and that's Megillah Esther, it's going to be around forever. Shaloach HaKain, it's around forever, Riches Yomid, and so is Haman, Esther, Mordechai, Al Megillah Esther, together Moshe Beinu, it's Dafka, these four Rabbi, perhaps the Out of the Shema, but Gavaldige Geschmack, Aleba the Gedei, and keep steiging.